Right now on Cape Cod, there are less than half of the homes available for sale than there were 10 years ago. Joining me today for Cape Media News Conversations to talk about the housing picture for Cape Cod, I welcome Ryan Castle, the Executive Director of the Cape Cod and Islands Association of Realtors. Ryan, thank you so much for coming in.
Sarah, thanks for having me.
So housing, one of the biggest issues on Cape Cod, and certainly so many different demographics are served, but one of the most shocking things that we're hearing is really the continuing decline in inventory here on the Cape. So let's start with the numbers. Let's talk a little bit about how many homes are available for sale right now on Cape Cod.
As of December 1st, because it's a rotating number based on what goes under contract daily and what comes on the market. As of December 1st, there was about 1,900 or so single family homes for sale, and then another 500 condos or so.
And so that's as compared to about 4,000 in 2007, 2,000 in 2004, 3,000 in 2012. So that's pretty significant.
Well, 2,700 in 2004.
Wow.
So it wasn't like it's a 100 decline. It's almost a third decline from 2004 levels. And when you really think and dive into thinking about how much you built in new construction, while one of the problems is that we don't build enough new construction, so we're not adding homes regularly on the for sale, but you're also, even those that have been built have actually decreased inventory because it's just not meeting demand.
Wow. And so what does this mean for the picture of housing overall? I mean,
so as inventory gets lower, prices rise. You know, it forces more people into higher price points, and it makes housing more expensive because simple economics, the supply goes down and the demand either stays the same or gets greater, then prices go up.
So what's the median home price right now on Cape Cod, if you know?
It's right about 400,000.
Which
median
is
sales price.
And that's a huge number. It was 365 in the middle of the summer. It was 300 at one point. It was 250. So we are definitely seeing those prices increase. You're definitely
seeing it up. What we're seeing for the year is sales are about, if you add single families and condos together, they're about flat for year to year, which in most markets you're seeing that because the inventory levels by large are down all across the country. I mean, we're at historic low inventories across the country. I think on Cape Cod it's a little more pronounced than, less than 50% from what we had 10 years ago. And prices go up. So sales are flat, prices go up. Sales would be flat, prices would go up. Sale prices would be flat, number of sales would go up if we had more inventory.
Sure. And so why? I mean, why are we seeing this on Cape Cod? Why are we seeing this nationwide? Are people holding on to their houses?
Massachusetts, we have a housing crisis. It's defined legally, statistically as a housing crisis now, and it's because of the lack of production. We've had too many towns for years put in place restrictions that stop growth. You see it along the 495 corridor in Boston. You see it in the close-in Boston suburbs as well. You see it in Central Mass. You see it on the Cape. The regulations have made it impossible for builders to want to build and build affordably.
Now, meanwhile, downtown Boston is booming. I mean, we have the seaport, the whole seaport expansion, and you can't turn a corner in Boston without seeing some sort of construction going in, primarily housing. But those are all very expensive housing options.
But they're also housing in an area that's said we want more housing, and it's a policy. It's driven by the policymakers proving and permitting more housing. And on the Cape, you're just not seeing that. So
Governor Charlie Baker just this month announced that he is making housing production a priority. And as you said, especially here on Cape Cod, we have a lot of restrictions in terms of zoning, in terms of building codes. So what needs to happen for Cape Cod to be able to do its part and not only fulfill this mandate, but also make it so that we can have people living and working here and having fulfilling lives?
The Governor Baker took a good step because for the last several years, zoning reform at the state level has been bottled up. You've had the environmental groups that wanted zoning reform in one way. You had the real estate groups that wanted zoning reform in another way. There was a lot of common pieces between the two. That's one of the worst kept secrets, is that there's a lot of mutual desires that are the same between those two groups. And then you had the cities and towns, right, that didn't like either one, where the environmental or the real estate groups were pushing mandates on the cities and towns to do certain things in zoning reform. So they were fighting both of them. Now, Governor Baker's proposal changes that a little bit, and we're digging into the proposal to see what's all in there. But it sets in a different way of saying, okay, instead of mandating this on cities and towns, those cities and towns that take advantage of it and do it and boost production, we're going to give you financial incentives to do that because it benefits the state, it benefits the local economy, it benefits the entire economy if housing production gets built.
So are we going to see some of those financial incentives here on the Cape?
We hope so. I mean, hopefully the bill gets passed. I mean, well, depends on what's in it, right? You know,
Right.
but if those bills gets passed, it's kind of like some people may be familiar with Green's Communities Act. There would be a designation under Governor Baker's bill that the towns could work to achieve to get those financial incentives. And then it also says if you're doing some pro-housing policies, certain ones that fall under certain things, at town meeting, it would only take 50% of a vote to pass those pro-housing policies, 50+1. For example, you know, there's a large push by the Smarter Cape partners along the Cape, led by the CCYP, for accessory dwelling units. So that would be part of that 50+1 needed rather than 2/3 at town meetings, which will start helping these towns pass some zoning reforms.
And we are seeing some towns adopt that accessory dwelling unit. And let's talk a little bit about that for a minute so that people can really understand what that's all about. And I know, as you mentioned, CCYP, the Smarter Cape Partnership, really pushing that ADU. So from what I understand, this is if you have a basement apartment, an in-law apartment, maybe a small cottage on your property, that the new zoning will allow you to rent that out to certain people.
And it would also allow you to build one. I mean, let's be honest, it's not just that you have one, it allows you to put one in as well. Yeah, it's a model bylaw that was written by the Cape Cod Commission. And so it seems the environmentalists love it, the business community loves it, the real estate community loves it. Falmouth, Trio, Provincetown have already passed similar ones this past year. There looks to be 3 or 4 more towns that will put it on town meeting warrants next year. It expands property rights, so conservatives should love it. But it also provides more housing opportunities, so liberals should love it. It actually is one that the only people that hate it are the not in my backyard crowd, and we really need to get out of the not in my backyard and to say yes in my backyard, because more housing opportunities and more property rights go hand in hand to increase housing production and make our economy stronger.
And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we face here on Cape Cod is the faction of people who really do want to keep Cape Cod the way it is and kind of preserve the small town feel of it. But let's get serious. We're not going to be able to survive as a functioning community unless we do something about our housing issues.
The way I kind of talk to people about it is that as a community, you either get better or worse. Nothing stays in perpetuity forever. Nothing stays exactly as it was forever. It either gets worse through neglect or it gets better through investment. And so I think that as long as people have then come to a common agreement, we want to get better, and that takes investment, whatever investment means. Then at least we both want to go the same direction, and then we can have a conversation on what better is. And try to decide, you know, the places that we want. I mean, I don't think there's any reason why Hyannis shouldn't be like Newport or like Portland even, where you have areas around Newport, around Portland that are protected, like Bar Harbor and Kennebunkport, and you really drive some development in places to really create places that everyone wants to live. I mean, you look at how Cape Cod was developed, look at the places we all cherish: Provincetown, Chatham, Osterville. Osterville has a ton of multifamily, and it blends right in. It's pricey because of where it is, being close to the harbors, but in other areas, that kind of multifamily that blends right in would not be as pricey.
Exactly, and I think changing people's minds to know that multifamily isn't necessarily a dirty word, or that affordable housing, even housing that's affordable, is a thing that we need. And I think that when we think about new construction on the Cape, though, I think that it's difficult because there's not a lot of land on which for us to build.
Well, under current regulations, right? So, I mean, about a third of Cape is protected. I think Cape third's also water. So that leaves a third buildable, right? You know, for simple math, right? But I think when you look at that is under current regulations, under that kind of thing, without investing in sewer, without investing in roads, without investing in smaller, you know, more compact design that actually saves the environment. And allowing for that to happen. That's the thing, is it's not even allowed for now, but it's actually better for the environment.
Right. So, and CCYP too just wrapped up its first housing design contest, some really innovative designs that came out of that. What happens now with those designs?
Yeah, so we're working through phase 2 now. What we hope is, I mean, one, those designs live at CapeCodYoungProfessionals.org. People can go check them out and look at them. But two is the goal is to get them to construction ready. There is a price tag associated with finishing them. I believe it's in the $4,000 to $6,000 range for each design. I would take a look at them. But we want to get them to construction ready to where they're kind of open sourced. We're working through some legal and funding legalities to get them to that point. And we would love to see that to where they're kind of open sourced and allow people to have a piece of land that can go find affordably priced houses. It's interesting, the expert panel said, you know, there weren't anything truly innovative. Well, they said they were just functionally well designed. There wasn't a lot of dead space, there wasn't a lot of things. They were compact in design. They made sense as you walk through in the design, which is interesting. But one of the biggest things that all three did that you don't really see is all three were ability to adapt over time to the changing family. And that's really what we're talking about with accessory dwelling, right? You're talking about the young family, the young couple that buys a house, let's think about the full life cycle, right? An elderly couple lives in a house. They used to have 3 kids living in the house. So they used to have 5 people living in a 3-bedroom house. And now there's 2 people living in that 3-bedroom house. Well, they take one of the bedrooms and turns it into an apartment. Lets a young professional live there. Well, maybe that couple passes away, and that young guy says, you know what? I'll buy this house. I've lived in it. I like it. I'll buy it. So he gets married and they buy the house and they're living in it. And then they rent out the apartment he was living in. So now it's a young couple supplementing their income with a year-round tenant on their property. Because, you know, they've moved into the middle class, and people that need assistance to live in that house need more affordable housing. Living in the middle class lifestyle tend to be better tenants as well than if you put them in assisted housing altogether. That's been proven as well from a social standpoint. And then as they have kids, maybe they take up all the house, and then so they don't have a tenant. So they have their 3 kids, and then their 3 kids go to college. Well, now then they go back to the same situation that they were in before. They can either, you know, they'll possibly rent out that unit again. That maybe turned into the way these house designs turned into the master suite while they were living with the kids. And then maybe one of the the husband passes away or something, and the wife, the widow says, you know, I still like to live in this house. I'll move into the apartment, and then I'll let another young family move into my house. That's the life cycle of a house, right?
Right.
And allowing houses to be adaptable as family dynamics change.
It's absolutely so important. So going back to the low inventory, what's the danger of this number staying the same or dropping? I mean, what are our biggest concerns when looking at a small inventory of housing in a place like Cape Cod?
Pricing out the year-round Cape resident, because what you have is you always will have, as the inventory gets tighter, prices get higher. You'll get the second home buyer that still can buy in here, the one that makes a lot of money elsewhere. But what you do is you don't have that available production for that first-time home buyer or the Cape resident to move in. What we found from the Cape Cod Commission's recent housing study is that you actually building housing at all price levels helps everyone. And so people will say, oh, well, we can't build those houses because they're $750,000 houses. But what that actually does, and what the commission study actually showed, is people that can afford more house and want to afford more house are living in less expensive housing because there's not housing to move into. And so if you free up that, if you build that and free that up, then they'll sell that house, move into that, frees up that lower price point so that people can then get into. So it's that housing cycle continuing that I keep talking about,
right?
Where people need to remember that building housing construction at all price points relieves housing pressure at all price points.
And we see that with rentals too. We had a discussion not too long ago about the proposed, the new Sea Captain's Row project on Pleasant Street in Hyannis, where there were some concerns about the price point of those rentals, and thinking, well, you know, if we're looking for affordable housing, which this is not, it's workforce housing, it's kind of mid-level professional housing, but as you can apply that model that you just explained to purchasing to renting as well. So people may be renting below their price point that can move up into these kind of middle working salary range places and then free up a little bit more housing.
Absolutely. I think you have a lot of stories of that. People living in several $100s less because that's all they could find than what they might want to, because there wasn't that middle class year-round rental housing.
Right. So when we look at this picture, what do you think needs to happen right away? Or what are the most important things that our legislators, that our community needs to focus on to be able to find some relief in terms of housing?
Say
here on
yes
the
in my
Cape?
backyard. I mean, that's really what it is, right? It's not being worried that, you know, 4 houses are going in down the street from you or something like that, right? I mean, let's be honest, and I laugh at this and some people get offended, but we don't have traffic problems on Cape Cod. We don't even have them in the summer. Boston traffic is worse every day of the year. Atlanta, Georgia traffic's worse every day of the year. Chicago, Illinois traffic's worse every day of the year than we have in the summer. As long as we continue to invest, as long as we invest in infrastructure, invest in policies to say yes in my backyard, and boost production, we'll be fine.
Great. Ryan, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. And yes, in our backyard, Ryan Castle is the Executive Director of the Cape and Islands Association of Realtors. For Cape Media News Conversations, I'm Sarah Coleman.